So thank you for starting the recording, whoever did that, and I'll hand it off to you, Mindy.
Thank you, Kyle. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. I have some things I want to share with you.
That's great. We can see it.
Perfect. So this is our farmers.gov webpage. It has all sorts of valuable information, and there is a feature on here that's will guide anybody across the nation into what's available for them depending on what disaster type events they may have suffered from. And I'm going to show you how to use that tool, and then I've got a slide presentation to go over with you, a short one at the end. So from this farmers.gov webpage, the protection and recovery link at the top is where we will be going today. And in the bottom right-hand corner of that, there is a disaster assistance discovery tool that I'm going to click on. And it's a very simple 5-step process that you answer various questions, and then it tells you what programs are available through the USDA and specifically through the Farm Service Agency. So the first question, simple, did I suffer a loss or damage as a result of a natural disaster? And I'm going to answer yes. When did the disaster occur? I'm going to use as an example through this what has happened in my county in March. There was a wildfire that burned about 30 to 40,000 acres, and so we're going to use that as our example going through this. So this event happened in March of 2025, and I'm going to advance now to step 3. You will see all sorts of questions for what the natural disaster was. So anything, it looks like 6 choices for storms, choices for low temperature. The wildfire scenario that we're going to use is found under the high temperatures category. And I'm going to go through to the next step. So step 4 now. And then this, what we answer here will really tell us what programs are available. So in my example, I want to say that the grazing of our pastures was impacted. I want to say that we had livestock impacted. And I want to say that our pasture land was impacted. And I'm also going to say conservation structures like solar pumps, things like that was impacted. And at the 5th and final screen, it wants to know where I am located that this damage occurred. And then when I ask to see the results, it guides me through numerous programs with hyperlinks to get me to information about each program. So one of these this tool that I'll go into more information about is the emergency assistance for livestock, honeybees, and farm-raised fish. We call that our ELAP program. The livestock forage disaster program has some wildfire benefits to it. The Livestock Indemnity Program, or LIP, along with our Non-Insured Crop Disaster Assistance Program. The Emergency Conservation Program we use a lot in the wildfires, and we'll talk in detail about that one. And then there's an EQIP, or Environmental Quality Incentives Program, that the NRCS, our sister agency, oversees. After it tells us what programs are available, it prepares the person using this to go to their service center and guides them in what they would need. If you've never been to the office, and I'm not going to read all of these for you, but it says we may need your driver's license. If you're an LLC or something, we would need your articles of incorporation. just various things to help you make that first visit to the office as productive as possible. Further down the listing, it provides links to some various forms that may be needed that you could complete ahead of your visit. And then finally, it identifies your service centers, your address, the phone number, and the email for the agencies housed at that location. So there you see my email and phone number, and then Tyler's email and contact information, who is with our NRCS, and they are housed here in the same office. So I think that's a pretty unique tool that we have available. If the blizzard was the conditions, or flooding, or things like that, it would customize the programs to those things. So now I'm going to switch the screens and share with you the slide presentation that I've created that has some specific information about those programs. Could somebody let me know that the screen has switched now to a presentation slide?
It looks great.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
So just to continue, farmers.gov is where that website that I showed you was available at. And to start with, so we have dealt with wildfires a lot in the county office here in Roger Mills County. And then the main programs we see utilized in our agency is the Emergency Conservation Program, the Livestock Indemnity Program, and the Emergency Livestock Assistance Program known as ELAP. And specifically, there are several components of it. And for wildfires, we primarily deal with either a grazing loss or livestock feed that was lost. So the ECP program intent is to fix damage that's so costly that federal assistance is required to return the land back to a productive agricultural use. If insurance or civil damages would be available, the eligibility for this program might be eliminated. The things we see this program used for would be either to repair a fence where some inline post had been burnt, or to completely tear out and build back a brand new fence because the fence wasn't salvageable at all, or to restore conservation structures. For instance, a solar unit providing livestock water was burnt in the fire, or there was a fiberglass livestock tank used to water the livestock, and that burnt to the point that it wasn't salvageable. Those are things that this program can assist with. It would all be on a cost share basis. The producers would have to incur the cost, and then we would basically pay a reimbursement to those eligible producers. The eligibility in our program, I thought, was worth noting. That eligibility falls to a farmer or a rancher who has an interest in the farm. They could be the owner of the land, they could be the tenant or the operator on the land, and they can be a person or a legal entity would be eligible for that. They have to contribute part of the cost of the practice. And the land that is eligible is land that's located in an area approved for this program. And the applicant must be, again, incurring the cost of restoring that. The ECP program is something that's always available, but anytime we have a natural disaster occur, each county has a slate of county committee members that are elected by the producers in the county. And it is that county committee that meets after a disaster and determines if there is a need to request a specific sign up for that disaster here in this county. So we had the fire that I talked about in March. Immediately the next day, our county committee met and requested this program for the producers affected by the fire. We had a 30-day sign up that ended a few weeks ago, where the producers that had damage and suffered losses come into the office. They present to us where their damage was, the extent of the damage, where the fences were, where the conservation structures were. And during our sign up period, we gather up all of that information as an agency and determine the amount of funding that is needed to be able to help those producers restore their land back to a usable state. We have to request that money from Washington, D.C., that the producers requested from us. And if and when that money is then approved at the national level, then we can approve producer applications and they can move forward in working to do the things that they had requested assistance on. Oh, it's important to note, and there's a lot of words on this slide. I didn't want to shortchange the slide at all, but environmental reviews are a very big proponent of anything we do through the emergency conservation program. We don't want to do anything to harm any fish or wildlife that might be impacted by something that we do. There's several components of the ECP program. It's not just for fires. There's a lot of things that can be done for flooding or even tornadoes that scatter debris. There's 6 components in all to the ECP program. And for the wildfires, we tend to use 2, and that being the fencing is one, and the conservation structures is a second one. And with the fence, there's generally very little impact to the environment. And this review is pretty minimal, especially if the fence is going right back in the same spot where it came out of. The way this program works, and I understand you guys wanted just a cursory overview, but wanted to share that documentation for a lot of our programs is very important. We ask that expenses be kept, and further that it be kept separate based upon what you're doing. Did you ask to repair a fence? We need that itemized in that way on a receipt that you turn in for your claim and for your cost share payment. Removal needs to be kept separate. Building a brand new fence needs to be kept separate. The way this works is that when we are approved for that money from Washington, D.C., we give the producers that were impacted 6 months to a year up front to do their work, and then they need to turn in their receipts by that initial expiration date. We do ask, we're very, everything aligning is very critical. If Farmer Fred does the work, but Susie Fred bought the fencing materials, that's not feasible for us. We want all invoices and receipts to align in the name of the person applying. And some of the work is hired. Some of the work would be that a person does the work themselves and uses their equipment, and we require documentation of the hours worked and things like that as well. And here's just some samples that we share in our producer meetings, which we had in the Leedy area back in March. That was the area impacted. We like to see things written either in like a notebook or on a calendar, and then summarized for us about how much the project cost them. So I just wanted, since I already had that in a previous presentation, wanted to go ahead and share that with you. This is an example of somebody else doing the work, so I wanted to show that as well. And then wanted to touch base on a couple of our other programs, not specifically conservation related, but things that we see in wildfires and even blizzards, flooding, that type of thing. Is our livestock indemnity program does cover death losses in livestock that were killed because of the natural disaster. Even if they were injured, there's provisions through this program to help offset maybe a loss of payment received at a sale barn or something because of the damage to those livestock. And again, with this program, documentation of everything is very important. And one final slide, and that would be our ELAP, or Emergency Livestock Assistance Program. With the wildfires, there's definitely, depending on the time of year, definitely could be a loss of grazing till that pasture recuperates from the fires. But in instances, there's also feed that is lost. Maybe a producer had a stack of hay bales. Those hay bales caught fire and they couldn't get them put out. This program helps with the recovery costs to replace those hay bales. Or maybe a producer needs to buy additional feed, things like that. That's all covered through this ELAP program. So that is what I have put together for you all in the way of slides about these specific programs. I'm willing to answer any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you, Mindy. Feel free to just chime in or raise your hand if you've got questions for Mindy. And while people are thinking of their questions, I have one. Is there any sort of pre-screening or other eligibility tools? I mean, you showed us the sort of checklist tool, but I know that certain programs, especially around drought and some of the wildfire programs, counties get sort of triggered for inclusion in those programs. Is there a way for a producer to just know whether their county or their area is eligible?
Yes, you mentioned the drought and the trigger. The LFP program that I didn't specifically address in my slides is one of them that fits that criteria that you're talking about. The drought monitor is available for viewing if you just do a Google search for United States Drought Monitor. And on there is a link that they put together of the FSA's eligibility in that program. So you can type your county name in on that site and it will tell you if that county qualified and the date of qualification and the severity of how much the program would pay. That program works to where it can pay from a 1 month compensation for the loss of forage up to a 5 month compensation. And that's based upon the severity of the drought. And on that United States Drought Monitor, you can find all of that information.
Thank you. I actually just dropped in the link to that tool on the Drought Monitor's website if people are interested. Katie had a question in the chat. Are beehives covered under ELAP?
Yes, bees are a specific component of the ELAP program. There's actually the bees, the livestock, and the aquaculture, the fish, are all 3 components through the ELAP program.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mindy? And this is a good time to ask those questions about wildfire impacts, considering the high sort of fire danger that we're seeing, especially in the Southwest and in middle of the country right now. Okay, hearing none, if you do have some, pop them in the chat or reserve them for the end. But I'd like to transition to our second speaker. Thank you, Mindy, for that presentation. I'd like to transition to our second speaker, David McGough, who's a research specialist for the Natural Resource Conservation Service in Oklahoma, the West Zone, and as part of the Woodward Technical Service Office. David, are you here? And in order to share your PowerPoint, I believe you can just click share at the bottom of the Zoom screen.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Hi.
Okay, very good, very good. I apologize for the difficulty in getting me in here.
I'm sorry, David. I just made you a co-host as well, so I think you just have to accept that, and then you can share your screen.
Okay, I see the button here. So I'm going to attempt this right here. Let's see, share.
It's perfect. We can see it.
Let's see, good. Okay.
Yeah.
I apologize for being a little unprepared. I was kind of down the list a little ways. We had some individuals that were going to speak that were unable to make it today. I'm a resource specialist with NRCS. I've been at a couple of the meetings that Mindy held after the wildfires. I work out of the area office here in Woodward, the Technical Service Office, and I help kind of the Northwest area counties. So most of my experience and things that I'll talk about are directly related right here close. I've got a few pictures of, this is the Camargo fire that was just a little bit north of Leedy, wasn't quite as big. It occurred the same day. It burned approximately 6,075 acres. The actual Leedy fire that was very close there to town burned about 27,000 acres. And unfortunately here in Northwest Oklahoma, we've gotten, I don't want to say accustomed to fires, but given the weather patterns in the last 10 to 15 years, we've had some really dry times and some extreme fire weather, and have had to deal with some pretty large fires. And unfortunately, these two fires are a little bit small compared to some of the others that we have dealt with. But as far as the NRCS side, most of the time we're dealing with, you can see there, that's a photo from the Leedy fire. In Oklahoma, we have a really big problem with the eastern red cedar tree. Juniper encroachment is a major problem on all of our rangelands. And they're very volatile on a day when you get humidities deep in the teens or lower, and your temperatures are kind of high and you get a strong wind. If a fire gets going, it's next to impossible to stop. The biggest problem is you can see there in that picture, whenever those trees burn in a crown fire, it pretty well takes everything with it. There's not hardly even any litter left on the soil. We have a lot of concern from producers about whether or not their grass is going to come back. And having studied range before I came here, the biggest thing that we tell everybody is it'll be okay. Those grasses evolved with fire. They're used to fire. Now maybe not to this extreme, but everything will come back. It may take some time. It may be relatively inundated with forbs that first year, but those grasses are not dead. It's kind of a touchy subject whenever you're visiting with farmers and ranchers that have had an entire ranch burned, and hopefully not lost any major structures, but some have. But one of the things about the wildfire is, whenever we get rid of these cedar trees from a rangeland standpoint and the health of the ecosystem, it's probably a positive. We don't want anything like that to happen in a extreme circumstance, but if you have to look at the bright side of things, there is, some positive of the junipers being removed, because once they are burned, they will not come back. And one of the big problems with eastern edge cedar is seed dispersal. They put on a lot of seeds every year. That's how everything spreads. And the only way to control the seeds is with fire. And whenever you burn across a place like this and get that much of the litter removed, all those seeds that were laying there are pretty well gone. This is some other pictures of the Camargo fire. Fires are always interesting. They have different burn habits and patterns, whether you're on the headwind side or the downwind side. And this burned the exact same day and didn't actually crown out a lot of these. So this was most likely either a pasture that didn't have quite the amount of fuel, or it was a flank fire, or maybe a fire that backed across there in some form or fashion. I have some pictures of some fires in the past that we've dealt with. This was in 2017. I don't know, some of you may know, there was a large fire that they called the Starbuck fire. They burned around 800,000 acres in Oklahoma and Kansas. And this 283 fire was the exact same day. And I've got some pictures here of what it looked like. You can see a little bit of water erosion in that bottom picture. From time to time, we will have some erosion issues if there's any amount of slope or things like that. If there's something major occurring there because of the vegetation being gone, and we've got an erosion concern, we can get some technicians and engineers out to maybe take a look and see if there needs to be some kind of dirt work, maybe a drop structure or something like that, to help take care of those things. But for the most part, it may take a little time, but the rangeland will heal itself. These are some photos from the Starbuck fire. The one up above at the top is, I think, about 6 weeks later. The two below are relatively soon after the fire. So you can see that if there's any soil moisture at all, those native grasses do come back around and do a pretty good job of coming back. Post-fire impacts with NRCS, we use a lot of OSU extension. We work closely with FSA. But the things that we like to talk about after a major wildfire event is the one positive is a fire can offer a reset. There's some opportunities there if you had a pasture or some fencing on your ranch that maybe you weren't always thrilled or happy with the fence placement. Maybe the fences were there when you took over or whenever you rented it. You have an opportunity to maybe adjust things. You can adjust some stocking levels. And I know it may look funny to say put a burn program in, but in many cases where, we have really heavy cedar trees, they were kind of the problem with the major wildfire. And if we can put in a burn program where maybe every 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, a rotation there somewhere where somebody can get, into a prescribed fire program, we may be able to avoid a large catastrophic fire like that in the future. Management, you have some opportunities to maybe change your grazing system, maybe type of grazing animal. After the fire, many times we have a lot of skeletons that are just, what's left of the tree whenever the cedar trees burn. Cedar doesn't break down really quickly. It usually takes somewhere between 5 and 6 years, and you'll see them kind of start to fall over with the wind. But given the type of wood that they are, they just don't break down very quickly. So in some of those areas where it's really thick, it can be a hindrance to the cattle. And then, like I said, obviously we can look at some erosion if there's anything like that occurring. For the most part, if you'll give it some time and let it rest, let the grass kind of get back to growing, the erosion will in many cases take care of itself. Fencing, we lean pretty heavily on FSA after wildfires. They have their programs that they work with fencing, but NRCS also has some cost share programs for interior fencing, as long as we can relate that to grazing some type of improvement of the grasses there. Just some cool pictures that I took when I was there. You can see there's a new fence there right in front of the camera, and a line that had been bladed out, and that's looking due to the north. A lot of times people don't understand the way big wildfires move, and everything behind me in that picture is burnt, much like this. And that, the fire is throwing out embers, and it's landing, a quarter, half mile, sometimes as far as 3/4 of a mile ahead of the fire, almost kind of like a rolling snowball. And that's kind of what makes things so difficult to control for the volunteer fire departments that are in many cases tasked with tackling these things. So you can see there's a lot of stuff there that wasn't burnt, and it had thrown fire out ahead of it. This day was pretty high winds. I don't know exactly the speed of the winds, but I would say they were 40 or 50 miles an hour pretty easily. Just some other neat pictures. One thing that a lot of people don't think about is escape areas or things like that, whether this was planned as an escape area for cattle. Many times a bottom, a hay meadow, or a small cropland field can come in pretty handy if you have a pasture full of cattle, and they need a place to go that's not going to completely burn up. Fence posts, we get a lot of questions about fence and wire and whether or not the fire is going to affect the wire, or, obviously the wood post is going to affect those. OSU did a study years ago where they looked at fire effects on wire. And in a nutshell, at the end of that, they basically determined that as long as there wasn't a brush pile or something like maybe a wood H-brace or wood post there that completely burn up, to get that wire really hot for a long period of time, for the most part, the wire is okay. It may burn the galvanization off of it and shorten its lifespan. And when I say that, I mean maybe it will only last another 30 years as opposed to 40 or something like that. But in the short term, that wire is still very viable, especially if steel fence posts were used and steel corners. The fire generally tends to move through quick enough that it doesn't have a tremendous effect on it. A slide here to go over just some of the assistance that we've already talked about. We have some technical advice is always is free and available. If somebody just wants to contact the office, we'd be happy to come out and take a look. We do have some financial assistance, mainly through the EQIP program. And some of those things include grazing plans, which may include a deferment that growing season right after the fire. Could possibly look at some prescribed burns to maybe clean up some of the woody residue that's left behind. We do have some woody residue treatment underneath brush control that's basically skeleton removal, where we can help gather and pile with equipment the skeletons and try to get those removed. Once again, I'm kind of repeating myself here, but some interior fencing, watering facilities. There's quite a few fiberglass tanks used around here, typically around the tanks. The grass is pretty short, and a lot of times it's a high use area, so there's not a lot of fuel there. But from time to time, we will have a solar pump, maybe the solar panels, some wiring, or maybe even a tank get damaged where it needs to be replaced. So we could look at some things like that, some erosion control like we talked about. And sometimes during emergencies or things like this, they will open up CRP for emergency grazing, and that would be through our partners with FSA. And I've just got a few more cool pictures here this is from the Starbuck fire in 2017. And these are about 6 weeks after the fire. And it kind of shows, how well things can green back up. It looks pretty devastating in the week afterwards. But Mother Nature has a pretty good way of, you just give it a little bit of moisture, especially with the native grasses, they tend to kind of perk back up and take things back over. This is in some of these areas in the same area. That bottom picture there, that's me standing there, and very near it, just 6-8 weeks later, you know, the ground is virtually covered with vegetation. It, like I say, it may be pretty forby or weedy, as some of us may say, but it generally tends to cover itself back up fairly well. Another couple pictures there. This is an interesting graphic that I threw in here. That's, you know, 100 years of fire, and these are a lot of the major fires that we've dealt with. The large one in the top left is the Starbuck fire that I referred to, and you know, in the bottom right there was the Ray fire, which was down near Leedy, Tologa area, and that was an area that was extremely inundated with eastern red cedar trees, and was a real issue to get it taken care of. But that just kind of shows that unfortunately we're in a pattern where we do have to deal with a lot of wildfires, and hopefully we can get into a wetter pattern and not be quite so prevalent. One of the things, like I mentioned earlier, prescribed fire is key out here on the rangelands. These native grasses evolved with fire, and really the only way to control the seed is with fire. Those trees, there's been some studies that say that a seed tree will affect about 26 acres around it, you know, with its seeds, and creating more cedar trees that come up. And that's just kind of an exponential effect there. Coordinated efforts with our neighbors and partners. There's some really good prescribed fire associations around that are getting a little bit of fire on the ground and trying to change the mindset and a little bit of the culture, where everybody's not so afraid of it. And then when it's done in a prescribed fire fashion, in the right weather patterns, it can be done safely and excuse me, and be taken care of without much danger. Another picture. This is one, I think I took this last summer, of a place where we had in a contract, and they did a prescribed fire, and this is just after the fire, or no, this is right before the fire. And so you can see that hillside, you know, if even half of those trees scattered out through there are seed producing trees, and they're affecting 26 acres, it just moves forward exponentially. And then this is that same place after a prescribed fire that was done, you know, safely. It didn't get away from anybody or anything like that. So I apologize if I went through that too quickly, but that's kind of the main things that I talked about at the fire meetings whenever we met at Leedy, and partnered with FSA, and Mindy spoke as well. So does anybody have any questions?
David, thank you. Matt actually had a question in the chat. Does
Okay.
the NRCS have a publication or standard addressing erosion control following burns?
I would have to do some research there. I don't know specifically about erosion, you know, anything that we have specific. Most of our things just kind of relate directly to erosion and don't necessarily focus on, you know exactly what caused it. It's just the fact that it's happening. But I could do some looking and forward an email, and see. Typically where I'm at, it's all mostly rangeland. We've got a lot of cropland sprinkled in, and
Mhm.
and typically it kind of heals itself back quick enough that in the amount of time we were to, you know, do some dirt work and get some engineering designs and things like that, you go back and you think, wow, you know, there's plants coming back in there. You know, do we really need to monkey with this, or is Mother Nature going to kind of take care of it? That's not to say that there's not every now and then a place where we would have an erosion concern. But I could do some looking and get back with you. I apologize for not having that answer.
Thanks.
Yeah, if you'll just email me that when you get it, Matt, I can pass that along to you.
Okay.
Thank you.
You bet.
Any other questions? Hands up. Or you can post them in the chat. I'll ask them. Does NRCS offer any programs for reseeding, strategic reseeding post fire?
You know, we would look at that on a case by case basis. It's pretty, like I said, it's pretty rare
Mhm.
to actually need to reseed after a fire.
Right.
You know, if it was a go back field and there was a lot of things there that maybe weren't native grasses, maybe it wasn't in very good shape, we would look at that on a case by case basis. But most of I believe all of our programs, when we plant grass, typically is cropland back to grass. Um, I I don't know of one for seeding rangeland, because for the most part, if we just kind of do our job and give it some rest and get a little bit of moisture there, it will generally kind of come back around. Like I said, unless it's, you know, something has happened, it's go back, but then we would consider that an old cropland field, and we could look at actually completely planting that back to a native mix that kind of follows along with the ecological site description.
Got it. Any other questions? And these can be for Mindy too. I think she's still with us. Well, hearing none, I mean, for the first time ever, I think we'll finish 5 minutes early. Thank you so much, Mindy and David, for joining us today and for presenting on fire. Again, next month.